how that reflects God's character. And the weeks to come, you'll hear from Ken and Mallory. But I want to start off my message just with a little video clip here. You may have seen it before.
And you, Frodo Baggins, I give you the light of Erendi, our most beloved star. May it be a light for you in dark places when all other lights go out.
So, you may have seen that before. That's from Lord of the Rings, probably one of my favorite book series and movie series. But in that scene, you have Frodo Baggins, who's kind of the main character, and he's in this awful place. Now, there's cobwebs everywhere, there's dead things, it probably smells really bad. But he is just scared out of his mind. He doesn't know what to do, and there's just terror setting in. But he has this vial, this light that this Lady Galadriel, has given him. And it's to be used when he is in his darkest situation, when all the other lights have gone out, when he needs hope, when he needs direction, when he needs guidance. And so in a lot of literature, a lot of books, a lot of movies, you have this distinction between light and dark. I mean, you can just think of Star Wars, light side versus the dark side, But when we think of this darkness, darkness almost symbolizes pain, can symbolize evil, can symbolize suffering. And I think that's really important to understand that concept of darkness, because we all deal with situations that are dark, whether it be like physical issues, relationship issues, even just dealing with the death of someone close to us. But it's also important in understanding the story we're going to talk about today, because we're going to talk about Jesus' arrest. And you can see that's a famous painting of the arrest of Jesus. And in that situation, in that darkness, I think Jesus radiates. And it's in the contrast of that darkness that his light shines out. So to understand this story, I think it's important to also know the background. So we look at the characters in this story. We see the Pharisees and the chief priests. They aren't exactly in the story, but they send people. They're the people sending the crowd to go and arrest Jesus. And so to understand the Pharisees and chief priests, they're kind of the religious leaders of Israel. And Rome is still in charge, but they've kind of given the rule of Israel to them. And they really see Jesus as a rebel. I mean, they clashed heads with Jesus early on in his ministry. Once he started saying that he could forgive sin and that he was the Son of God, they're like, no, this guy's going to be trouble. He's going to cause chaos. He's a disgrace to our religion, but this guy has to go. We got to get rid of this guy. So the Pharisees are looking to kill Jesus. Then you have Judas. Judas was one of the 12, and Jesus had a lot of people following him during his ministry, but Judas was one of those people that would have known Jesus personally, would have spent like almost every day with Jesus. But now Judas has flipped. He's turned coats and he goes to the Pharisees and he says, "Well, what would you give me if I gave up Jesus, if I betrayed him?" And they were more than willing to pay Judas off for that. So you have that betrayal. You have the disciples who have been following Jesus for all this time, but they still don't quite understand what Jesus really came to do. They're still expecting kind of a earthly kingdom. They see Jesus as the Messiah. They understand that. But in their minds, the Messiah is going to come and set up this earthly kingdom. He's going to get rid of the Romans who have been persecuting them. He's going to get rid of the Pharisees and all those people who are also trying to kill them. And he's going to establish this rule, and they're going to be right there with him. So they have great expectations, but they're also really not understanding the situation. And then you have Jesus. In the passage right before this, he's in the garden. After the Last Supper, he's taken all of his disciples and he's gone to the Mount of Olives that overlooks Jerusalem, and he is intensely praying in the garden. And you can see he's definitely suffering at that point. I think it's the only point that you really see Jesus like that, in that intense pain and agony where he's literally crying blood and it's saying, God, if there's any other way to do this, oh, please, but your will be done. And so you have all this stuff leading up right to this moment, to the moment that he's arrested. And so here Jesus is brought face to face with the intense reality of betrayal, arrest, and eventually a horrific death. But he responds to it in a way that we wouldn't expect. I'm going to go ahead and read, and it's in Luke 22:45 through 53. So if you have a Bible, you can turn there. It's also going to be on there, but I apologize, it's a bit small. But I'm going to go ahead and read that. When he rose from prayer and went back to the disciples, he found them asleep, exhausted from sorrow. Why are you sleeping, he asked. Get up and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. While he was speaking, a crowd came up, and the man who was called Judas, one of the 12, was leading them. He approached Jesus to kiss him, but Jesus asked him, Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss? When Jesus' followers saw what was going to happen, they said, Lord, should we strike with our swords? And one of them struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. But Jesus answered, no more of this. And he touched the man's ear and healed him. Then Jesus said to the chief priests, the officers of the temple guard and the elders who had come for him, am I leading a rebellion that you have come with swords and clubs? Every day I was with you in the temple courts, and you did not lay a hand on me. But this is your hour when darkness reigns. So you have this situation, and it's a group of armed men, torches. I don't know what kind of weapons they have, but they're coming to arrest Jesus. And whenever you have that kind of situation, how would you expect someone to react? No, this is a situation that's totally overwhelming, that's potentially really dangerous. How do people usually react? There's just instinctual reactions for people usually when they're put in those situations, and it's usually fight, flight, or freeze. And those are just kind of instinctual in us as humans. Whenever we're put in an overwhelming situation, we kind of turn to those. And you can see it in even how they probably expected Jesus to react this way. They were armed. They were ready for a fight. If the disciples were going to put up a fight and Jesus was going to put up a fight, they were ready for that. You understand where the Mount of Olives is. You have Jerusalem kind of over here. You have the Mount of Olives, and then you have the wilderness. And the wilderness over here is where you go if you want to hide for years. It's where David went to hide from Saul. It has tons of valleys, hills, caves you can hide in. You can just get lost there. That's the place you want to go if you're trying to hide from someone. So when they heard he was on the Mount of Olives, they're probably, oh, he's making a run for it. We better go get him. And they had brought torches along. They were probably expecting to have to come and root him out of some dark place. Like they were expecting him to flee. But how would you react in this situation? You have a mob of angry people, armed people, coming to arrest you and eventually take you to your death. How do you deal with tough situations or suffering when you are put in that place of darkness? How do you respond to that? For me, I know my own reaction when I'm put in kind of those situations, and mine is flight. That's been proved many times, but I was with my cousin, and we got the opportunity to travel to Ireland this last summer, and we were kind of exploring this property. It kind of reminded me of like the Secret Garden, because it was this garden, but it was all overgrown, not taken care of, and we could see this mansion kind of in the middle, and it looked pretty run down, but we were curious, so we wanted to go check it out, and we also were lost, so we needed directions. So we're walking up to this mansion, and we get to the point where we can see kind of the front porch. And once we kind of round this corner and can see the front porch, I see these two dogs jump off the porch and start running at us. And so before I can even think, I'm turned around and I'm booking it the other way. I'm thinking of the nearest fence that I can jump over. And then I get about like 10 or 15 meters, and then my brain kicks in and is like, oh, my cousin, she's not quite as fast as me. Maybe I should go help her out. And so I turn around kind of expecting to have to like fight off these vicious dogs to keep my cousin from being mauled. And she's over there like petting these two puppies. So really, really no dangerous situation there. But yeah, I was a little embarrassed. And she's like, "You left me? How did you do that?" But that's my instinct. When that kicks in, I'm gone. And you can even see it with things like when I deal with other situations, like when I'm overwhelmed with schoolwork, I tend to try and avoid it. I go to somewhere where I don't have to think about it. I can just kind of push it out of my mind. Or dealing with relational issues, if I'm dealing with someone, I have a tendency to try and avoid them rather than go up and actually confront them. I try to flee. But that's how I deal with it. But now let's look how Christ deals with it. He deals with it in kind of a way that we wouldn't expect. In this situation of darkness, Christ radiates confidence that shines through the darkness of the situation. But how is he able to do this? Like, where does he get this confidence? Because this confidence is not an accident. His confidence is based in God's sovereignty. And what I mean by that is that it's God's control of the situation and his plan to bring about good through it. Jesus knows the end game here. He's read the last chapter of the book, which I've also done a couple times. Like, you just can't take the suspense anymore. You have to look at the back of the book. But Jesus knows what's going to happen. He knows that there's going to be pain and suffering, but he also knows that in the end, there's going to be something way more beautiful, way more powerful. Hebrews 12, 1 through 2, and I think it's in your outline, says, "Who, for the joy that was set before him, Christ, endured the cross, despising its shame, and he sat down at the right hand of the throne of God." He knew what was going to happen, and this gave him confidence, and that's why he was able to respond this way. And so we can look at Jesus' confidence and how he radiates this confidence. And, keeping with the theme of light, I kind of thought of the example of a prism. Because you see this confidence as kind of the white light going in, and if you've ever used a prism, you shine white light into it, and it will refract. It will break the white light into its different parts, its different colors. So that's kind of an example I thought. Jesus radiates this confidence, and we can look at what that confidence means through how Jesus responds. And really, his confidence shines the brightest when we contrast it with the disciples and how they reacted. So the first thing is that Jesus was prepared versus the disciples who were unprepared. Now, Jesus, you can see this in how he responds to Judas. You can almost sense the pain in being betrayed in what he says. Like, Judas, really? The kiss that symbolizes friendship, that is the greeting for your master? This is how you're going to betray me? Really? You're still putting up this facade? But you don't see any surprise there. He's ready for that. He already knew. He had the right perspective. He knew the end game. He knew what was coming already, and you can see from his life that he had been preparing for it. Like, even when he was small, his parents left him in Jerusalem on accident. And they come back and find him, and he's on the temple steps talking with the leaders. And they're asking him questions. And they're like, why didn't you come with us? Where were you? And he's like, don't you know I was supposed to be doing the will of my Father? He knew what his purpose was. And he also took the time to prepare for that. You can see through his ministry, he was always constantly off in prayer. And even in this, he was in the garden right before this. And you can see in that moment that he says, not mine, but your will be done, all that pain that he's feeling, that's kind of the moment that he finally becomes resolute. He's now prepared to deal with these people that are going to come and arrest him, which happens right afterwards. But then you look at the disciples. I mean, they didn't even understand. They kind of had the wrong goals in mind to begin with. So they weren't prepared. They couldn't even stay awake in the garden with Jesus before that. So kind of what's the application for us? It's that what you do now matters. Whether life is going smooth or you're in the midst of a hurricane, you're building a foundation for how you deal with future situations. Now, for soccer, we're in the spring season right now, so we have a few games and practices, but really it's all about preparing for the fall and when we actually have our season. So my coach is constantly reminding us to trust in the process. Trust in the process, put in the work now so that you'll have that foundation to build off of on the season. So how are we spending our time now? How are we preparing for those situations we know are coming? John Wesley is quoted as saying, "I have so much to do that I must spend several hours in prayer before I'm able to do it." And we talked about this in Sunday school the other week, but when we hear that, especially in our culture that's always go, 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 we have to get this done, we're always busy, that just seems weird. I mean, you have a bunch of stuff to do, why don't you do it? What are you doing praying? But really, sometimes that's the one thing that will prepare us for everything we do have to do. I mean, are we building the relationships so that when things fall apart, that we have the people there who will help us through it? What are we doing with our time? Because if we're not prepared, we become reactionary. And that's kind of the second thing, is Jesus was compassionate versus the disciples who were impulsive. Now, the disciples were taken way off guard. And you can see this when they asked Jesus, like, what are we supposed to do? Should we use our swords? Like, they're not sure what to do in this moment. And you see Peter, who's always kind of taking the initiative. He gets out his sword and slashes this guy's ear off. And then, like, they just acted impulsively. First of all, that fight kicked in, and they're like, we're going to defend Jesus because we're under attack here. But Jesus, who did have the perspective and was prepared, didn't act impulsively. And he told him to cut it out. Like, Peter, I mean, first of all, you should just go back to fishing because you only got the guy's ear. But this is not how it's supposed to work. You guys don't get it. Like, I'm supposed to actually go and do this. And I told you before, you guys just weren't listening. But he doesn't just tell him to stop it, cut it out. He, like Jesus does so many other times, he goes the extra step of having compassion. So imagine you're the guy, it was the chief priest's servant. Imagine you're the guy that got his ear cut off. You're hunting down someone you believe is disgracing your religion, has the potential to bring chaos to your country, and then without anger, without fighting back, he kneels down and heals you, heals your wounds. What do you do in that situation? Like, mind blown. I have no idea what I would do. But whenever we're put in those tough situations or those tough positions, we have a gut reaction to retaliate. When we're hurt, we want to hurt back. We want to act impulsively like the disciples did, especially because most of the time we know we're right? We're always right. But not only are we called to restrain ourselves, but we're called to have compassion on the people who are even causing pain. There's a quote from a pastor that I know. His name is Jeff Austin, but he said, hurt people hurt people. People who have hurt in their lives tend to take it out on others. If we're not confident in who we are in Christ and grounded in our purpose, then we can miss out on the opportunities to be compassionate to those who need it the most. We'll be too busy trying to defend ourselves. Then the last kind of contrast here. Jesus was bold while the disciples despaired. You can see there's no fear in Jesus' response to these people that are coming to arrest him. I mean, even in John's account, this is Luke's account of the arrest, but in John's account, when they came up to him, he steps out and they all kind of draw back. They're taken off, like the crowd who's come to arrest him is taken off guard. But he calls out Judas in his betrayal. And he even confronts the people who are coming to arrest him in their hypocrisy. So he's standing there in front of a group of people who are coming to get him, and he's like, you guys, you are a bunch of hypocrites because you're coming to get me in the night when I'm not, like when no one else is around. Like, this is unjust. You know, you could have arrested me back in the temple. You had more than the right opportunity. But, like, this is underhanded. You know this isn't right. And I don't think that would have been my first response to a group of armed people coming to kill me. I just don't think I would have reacted like that. But Jesus is confident in this, that he stands up boldly in front of these people. He doesn't slink away. Well, then you look at the disciples and what they did. Once Jesus kind of cut off the option to fight, then it kicked into the flight, and they were out of there. Mark, in his account, even tells us of the young man who ran away without his clothes. They probably like grabbed his robe or something, and he left it. He was gone. He's totally naked, but he got away. And Peter even goes as far, like he followed Jesus for a bit, but then he ends up denying Jesus. Like, you see, there's no one left with Jesus. They've all despaired. Jesus was confident in what had to be done. He stood up to the injustice, even in the face of those who would put him to death. Because, there's things that we know that are right and wrong. And it's different than acting impulsively, because we're not acting out of our emotional responses, but it's acting out of what God has told us is true. It's acting out of what we know our conscience is telling us. And he tells us to stand up boldly. He's our example to stand up boldly. Being aware of our conscience and not being afraid to follow it, even if there are consequences. So what? In all of this, like situations of darkness, pain, of suffering, I think a lot of times we're more like the disciples when it comes to dealing with trials, persecutions. We're often unprepared or ill-equipped to deal with situations. We're impulsive and lash out when we're hurt. And we're quick to despair when things seem out of our hands. But the thing is, we don't have to be. We're broken people in need of a Savior. But Jesus is our confidence in the hour of darkness. He gives us the confidence when we look at his example. 1 Peter 4:12-13 says, "Dear friends, do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal that has come to test you, as though some strange thing were happening to you. But rejoice inasmuch as you participate in the sufferings of Christ, so that you may be overjoyed when his glory is revealed." I like how he describes it as a fiery ordeal. But these things, we know we're supposed to expect trials. We know we're supposed to expect suffering. But we can always hold on to and have confidence in Jesus, who in the end does give us that joy. We're always able to have that joy. Now, we gain that, we have that confidence. We have that confidence when we take our identity as his children seriously. We gain confidence when we actively prepare for the trials we know we're going to face. When we lay aside our impulsive reactions to see those who need our compassion, or just need compassion in general. When we stand boldly against injustice and sin, even in the face of opposition. We have confidence, and we do all these things knowing that he is with us and that he has overcome the world. So what do you put your confidence in? I mean, it's very possible to put your confidence in other things. You can put it in humanity, government, money, even religiosity. You can put it in someone else. You can put it in yourself. There are plenty of other things you can put your confidence in, but those things will fail you either now or later. Jesus is the only place we can find true, lasting confidence. Now, if you've never accepted Jesus into your life, now is an opportunity to do that. I'm going to pray and close, and if you have questions about that or just want to take that opportunity, me, Ken, or Dane will kind of be here at the front. Just come find us. But what does preparing, being compassionate, and being bold mean in your life? At your job, at your house, with your friends? Just what does it mean? How can you radiate that same confidence that Jesus showed us? Let's pray. Lord, I thank you so much that you do give us that confidence.